Hello guys and welcome to my Assassination Rogue guide for 8.1 in Battle for dazar'alor. My name is Squiggle and today I'm going to show you guys how to pump the DPS on the Assassination Rogue. So it is currently Thursday in Australian time and I think it is a good time to start doing videos for the other two specs and really start to do a bit of a comparison. Of course the sample size isn't too great. The large guilds are more doing split clears, so we won't get to see all of the top rogues performing at the moment. However, it is still better than what we had before. In this video, I'm going to go through Azerite traits, trinkets, and what talent setup we should be running. On top of this, I'm going to be going through logs and sims to see what I think is going to be the best rogue spec for certain fights. And lastly, I'm going to go over the stats and what sort of macros and rotation you can use to make yourself perform better in Raid and Mythic Plus alike. So without further ado, here is my guide and let's get assassinating. Now to start with, I'm going to go over what the logs are looking like for all of the characters and how the Assassination Rogue pairs up amongst all of these classes. Now as you guys can see, this is only from 2 days into the Raid tier, and for this reason, there is still so much subject to change. However, already we can see that the Assassination Rogue is doing quite well. It is actually the best of the melee at this current standing, and the other two rogue specs are only slightly behind, being some of the best melee specs as well. Now, the main reason why I think this is the case, and after playtesting some of the fights, is because the Assassination Rogue can do lots of damage to multiple targets, even if they are running around, if they are being all spread. Of course, if they are all on one pixel, the Outlaw Rogue is going to have an amazing time. However, this simply is not the case when it comes to a lot of these raid fights. What I will also add is that the Assassination Rogue is extremely good at swapping to some of the ads. You can save Vendetta and Exsanguinate for some of these windows. And with these things in mind, I feel like the Shrouded Suffocation build can be extremely strong in the next tier. Which also leads me to think that Shrouded Suffocation is going to be extremely good in the Battle for dazar'alor. Now we're going to have a look at the Azerite traits for Battle for dazar'alor. Now these are sims for single target DPS, and as you guys can see, Shrouded Suffocation is currently the best, just behind Treacherous Covenant, followed shortly by the Double Dose as well. Nothing Personal is pretty close. However, I will add that Nothing Personal devalues after the first trait. From this, we can already see that for multiple target fights, we want to be running 3 Shrouded Suffocation, followed by 3 Scent of Blood, or 3 Treacherous Covenant, depending on how many ruptures that you can keep up simultaneously. This is also the same thing for Mythic Plus, as I recommend you guys run these traits for both of these scenarios as well. I will also add that if there is a single target approach in mind, no cleave, no other ads or something like this, then it may be worth going the Toxic Blade build. For the Toxic Blade build, we can see that Treacherous Covenant, Double Dose, and Nothing Personal are going to be very strong, followed by Shrouded Suffocation being slightly weaker, as we are not running the Exsanguinate talent. So now we are very briefly going to go over what we should be running for Mythic Plus environments. This is just a very stock standard sim. It does not show your damage for every single Mythic Plus dungeon, and it is just a clever assumption based on, what most dungeons are going to look like. So first off, we can see that Shrouded Suffocation is better than everything else by a mile. This is simply because if you get constant stealths in and you are hitting 2+ targets all the time, then your Shrouded Suffocation is just going to do insane damage. After this, I'm going to say that Treacherous Covenant, Echoing Blades, and Scent of Blood are all going to be very good, as they give stats, increased Fan of Knives damage, and they also increase your agility if you are rupturing multiple targets. Of course, if you are looking at high fortified keys, we can see that Scent of Blood and Shrouded Suffocation are actually going to increase value, as these targets staying alive for extended periods of time means that you get a lot more out of your dots and your ramp. Now, of course, we are going to have a look at what talents we want to run for both of these situations. Now, it is actually quite interesting to see that Deeper Stratagem is starting to overtake Vigor in certain sims. Now, both of these are kind of much of a muchness, and you can see that these things are within 0.5% of each other. Another thing that I will also add is that blindside is starting to come into the simulations as well, which leads us to think that Assassination Rogue may have slightly better execute than the average class. Next up, we're going to briefly look over what you should be running for the Toxic Blade build. Now, of course, Treacherous Covenant is going to be very good, as well as your double dose for your single target damage. I will also add that putting a single nothing personal may be good for this if you cannot get all three of these traits. However, I do not recommend this for every single fight. I think this may be good on 1 or 2 fights at maximum. Also, for those who are new to the Rogue, I will briefly go over the other talents that I recommend for these lines. So first off, you want to go Elaborate Planning at all times. This is currently very good compared to the other 3 talents. Now, there are times that you may want to start going Blindside, especially if there is a progression boss that requires it. I was thinking that this might be good for Gahun. However, Gahun had so many 2+ target moments that Blindside was just not effective, and you weren't using this outside of the 20% window. Next up, we are going to have a look at Subterfuge. This is good single target and gets even better on multiple targets. As for Master Assassin, it may catch up later in the expansion, but I really think that this needs buffs. It either needs a 6-second window or it needs to go to 100% to really solidify itself as the single target talent of choice. Next up, we are seeing that Deeper Stratagem is starting to be our best in slot for the Exsanguinate build. Now, this is for multiple reasons. I'll have to play around with this. However, it makes use of Shrouded Suffocation, giving you 3 combo points instead of 1, so that you may get some funky openers that people are testing out in the next tier, which aren't the same as the Vigor openers that you have been seeing before. Next up, for Raiding and Mythic Plus, I recommend going Cheat Death. However, there will be some situations where you want to go Leeching Poison or Elusiveness. It's about 10 to 20% of fights during each tier. However, do not rule it out just yet. After this, we are going to see Prey on the Weak, Iron Wire, and Internal Bleeding. Iron Wire is fantastic when it comes to Mythic Plus, and if you don't need the interrupts for raiding, you should probably go Internal Bleeding. After this, Exsanguinate, Toxic Blade, and Venom Rush. Exsanguinate is my recommended talent of this tier. This is simply because how our bleeds work in AoE situations, and with the heavy cleave environment that Battle for dazar'alor gives us, Exsanguinate is going to shine on most fights despite sims for Toxic Blade being slightly higher. Last but not least, we are going to see Poison Bomb, Hidden Blades, and Crimson Tempest. If you can consistently get 3+ target damage off, you want to be going for the Crimson Tempest. So this is only really something that you consider in Mythic Plus, and maybe the Opulence if you are struggling on the ads. However, most of the time you simply want to set and forget your Poison Bomb. Now, this is something that you go in King's Rest as well for Mythic Plus, and for certain scenarios in Mythic Plus you will take Poison Bomb over Crimson Tempest. Next up, we are going to have a look at the trinkets for Exsanguinate for single target and AoE scenarios. Now, first up, the Galecaller's Boon is going to be our best in slot trinket for single target, followed by the Kimball's Razor Claw. Now, Galecaller's Boon is fantastic, however it does have the drawback where you need to stand on the rune while it is up. So in high movement fights or some Mythic Plus scenarios, this is a no-go. I would generally go for Illustrious Golden Plumage most of the time in Mythic Plus. Next up, we are followed by Kimball's Razor Claw, which is going to give us a strong bleed on the target. It is essentially like a 400+ version of Fathoms, and it is going to do a lot of damage single target. However, with the way that is worded, it seems like it's going to fall off for multiple targets, so I'd recommend this for raiding. However, I would not recommend this trinket for Mythic Plus. And last but not least, to top off the big 3, we have the Harlan's Loaded Dice. Now, especially if you are new to the Rogue, this is a fantastic trinket. This is not going to be affected by your gameplay, it is simply a proc trinket, and it is fantastic in single target and AoE scenarios alike. So here we can see what all of these trinkets look like if we are running the Mythic Plus dungeons. Now, like I said before, this is not 100% accurate, this is just a guesstimate. However, the Galecaller's Boon and the Harlan's Loaded Dice will be best in slot if you guys can get these at some higher levels. So make sure you guys are in Shrine of the Storm and Freehold. You know, most people will be down to run the freeholds with you. However, you may need to run a lot of +10 shrines as well, which a lot of people are not too comfortable with. So just briefly, I'm going to go over what the best in slot trinkets are if we are running the Toxic Blade. Now obviously we can't really count the Doom's Wake, and Dread Gladiator's badge is quite hard to get unless you are a pretty solid PvPer. However, what I recommend that you guys run is the Kimball's Razor Claw and the First Mate Spyglass. Of course, Galecrawler's Boon is good, however haste is slightly worse when you look at the Toxic Blade build. So next up, we're going to have a quick look at what our breakdown is for the stats. Now obviously first we are going to see that weapon DPS is a huge one. This is our main hand weapon DPS, so you want to make sure that you have a very high eye level weapon in your main hand and perhaps your socketed weapon and your lower weapon in the offhand. Next up, Critical Strike is currently my highest simming stat after this. Most of the time when I look at it, it is haste. However, right now my haste is just that high that my crit is probably a bit lacking. So in terms of optimization, I'm going to look at gemming a little bit more crit and getting more crit gear into my crit haste build. So after this, we can see that haste, mastery and versatility are quite close together, and the same thing goes for agility. Now offhand weapon DPS, like I said before, is slightly lower, and we can see that this offhand weapon is very minuscule and doesn't really mean much outside of the stats. One thing that I will also add is that if I were doing Mythic Plus predominantly on a rogue, I would aim to get my mastery as high as possible. I would aim for as much mastery, haste and versatility over Critical Strike as I possibly could, as Critical Strike doesn't really help our bleeds as much as these other stats. So for Mythic Plus, as much mastery as you can, followed by a decent amount of haste. So now we want to have a look at our opener for all of these different builds. Now the build that I recommend you guys run is the build that involves Exsanguinate and double or triple Shrouded Suffocation. So if you have at least one Shrouded Suffocation and you have Exsanguinate, then follow this opener. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a Garrote into a Rupture, into another Garrote, into a Vendetta, into a Mutilate, and then into another Rupture, at which point we are going to use our Exsanguinate. Now it is crucial that you guys refresh your dots before you use your Exsanguinate, and what we are trying to do is use our pandemic effects to make as long Ruptures and Garrotes as possible in order to maximize this damage. So like I said, we're going to start off with this. What I recommend as well is that you guys macro all of your trinkets and racials into these abilities as well, your Exsanguinate and all of the other jazz. So we want to go with another Vanish in this when this is about to expire, and then we just do the standard as soon as the Rupture and the Garrote are done. We just want to get some max duration Garrote and Ruptures if we can. So after this, we're basically going to wait for our next Exsanguinate. We're going to wait for this Garrote to fall off so that we can get the maximum damage out of our Shrouded Suffocation window. Now just briefly, I'm going to show you guys what to do with our Exsanguinate when we do not have Vendetta or Vanish and we are not opening up. So the main thing that we want to remember to do, as soon as this is about to come off cooldown, we want to make sure that we are getting our max duration bleeds on the target. So what you can see right now is not max duration bleeds. You want to get on the final Garrote, the final Rupture, and then make them as long as you can. So unless your Garrote is going to be a long pandemic, we are actually going to see that our long Rupture is going to be slightly more valuable than the long Garrote, because it does a higher dot tick. So now I'm briefly going to go over what our opener should look like if we are running Toxic Blade and Shrouded Suffocation. Now first off, we are going to go with our Garrote into a Rupture, into another Garrote just like before, but then we are going to do Vendetta into Toxic Blade into Envenom. Then essentially we are going to spam out as many Mutilates into Envenoms as we can into this window, and we are generally aiming for 2 to 3 Envenoms per Toxic Blade window. So like I said, gonna start off with this, into the Vendetta, into the Toxic Blade, and then just go like this. So we aren't going to refresh our rupture until we're done with this toxic blade window. Going to get one more down, and then we are going to refresh the rupture just before it goes out. We don't need to worry too much about pandemics when it comes to this build. However, what we're going to do is we're going to wait for our vanish for this garrote to end. We're going to vanish, envenom, garrote, and we are going to go back into our standard rotation. Now you guys saw how I was pulling there. You want to make sure that you are pulling as much as you can for your toxic blade. Just missed the last envenom there, however that is fine. Last but not least, I'm going to show how to play out multi-target scenarios in both raiding and especially Mythic Plus. So what we're going to do is we're going to emphasize having very long garrotes on each target, and we're going to try to dot 3 targets up each time per vanish or stealth window. Now after this, we are going to make sure that we are getting a Crimson Tempest onto as many targets as possible, as well as 1 rupture on 1 target before using our exsanguinate. The exsanguinate is going to speed up our dots as well as generating more energy, so it is quite good for starting off a pull. So for example, our standard pull is going to look something like this. We're going to just tab through and garrote everything, and then we are going to rupture one of them. Then we're going to get this on cooldown. We are going to get in with our Crimson Tempest. Please give me some crits. So my vanish isn't up just yet. However, we are going to go through and get a few ruptures on our targets. You guys can see that the Crimson Tempest is about to fall off. So we're going to go like that. Next, we're going to go in with our 3 garrotes, and we are going to see some big damage coming out of this. You want to get about 2 to 3 ruptures going per pull, and you want to refresh them under 7 seconds. Now after this, you can pretty much just go around and use your Crimson Tempest before it falls off, and then just refresh your dots. We're going to get a nice pandemic with this one into an exsanguinate. After this, in our exsanguinate window, we don't need to worry too much about the ruptures falling off, as we are getting increased energy regen from this exsanguinated rupture. Now, just quickly before we go, I wanted to show you guys what I recommend that you guys run for your macros in this coming raid tier and all tiers. You guys want to make sure that you're running this talent right here. This is basically going to show when you have Toxic Blade active, it's going to show Toxic Blade on your bars. If you have Exsanguinate, then it's going to show Exsanguinate. And then after this is going to use your Trinket, be it a Gale Callers or an Essence of Yulon or something like that. On top of this, what I also recommend is that you guys macro your Trinkets into your Vanish as well as your Racials. I am a human, so macroing my Racial into Vanish is not a great idea. However, if you play your Trolls or your Orcs or something like that, then this is going to be a great idea. Last but not least, macro it into your Vendetta, so make sure that you're macroing all of your things into these 3 spells to be able to maximize your damage. Now that just about wraps up my guide for the Assassination Rogue in Battle for dazar'alor. Now I am going to add that this is going to be an extremely strong spec in raiding. It may be outshined by Outlaw on a few fights, and it may be outshined by the Outlaw Rogue in Mythic Plus alike. However, I will say that especially for a beginner, the Assassination Rogue is going to be very good, and in the hands of a Master Rogue, this spec can do some nuts things in raiding. This thing is going to do so much cleave and so much single target damage at the same time. If you guys enjoyed this guide, make sure to thumbs up the video and make sure to subscribe down below if you want to see more of my content. Thanks for watching guys, and happy raiding.